Good afternoon and welcome to all our attendees and panelists to this discussion on performance reviews versus feedback. Should they coexist or should be kept separate? My name is Srinivas Vijayaraghavan. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of Loop. We are a health assurance company that is working towards keeping corporate employees and their families healthy and while providing for them when they fall sick. So joining me on the panel today is a distinguished group of HR leaders who come from different parts of India and a different variety of industries to talk about this very important topic, something that we all have maybe received and given out, which is feedback. But it's also possible that we may not have given it in the right way, have taken it in the right way, and we've used it in our performance review systems, but are not quite sure exactly the role that it is playing. So this was a very popular topic that came up during our regular content calendar, and we thought, what better than to get a bunch of HR leaders to come and talk about this. So before we start off, I would request my panelists, co-panelists, to please introduce themselves, taking a couple of minutes each for the benefit of the audience. You can go in whichever order you wish.
So let me start then. I'll go first. Hi everyone. I am to give the right introduction. I'm a retired Lieutenant Commander from Navy. I have around 10 years of experience from defense background, and now almost approximate 9 years of experience in corporate. So I have been in the field of HR and operations for a pretty long time now. And I come from a organization which has very, like when we talk about defense forces, the processes are very set, things are very much streamlined. But then, yes, with the changing times, things are changing. And my experience so far, I have been consultant with two groups wherein I was mainly looking into employee engagement. I was mainly looking into how to bring up the morale and how to bring up, employee overall satisfaction level. So I've been working in this field for pretty long. I am a cognitive behavior practitioner. So I have been closely watching how employee engagement and employee behavior varies with the company culture. Right now, I am currently working as a director HR and operations for TRUCKX Technologies, which is a SaaS-based company. We have our clientele in US. We are basically into IoT devices. So bit of mix of technical and mix of culture, I would say, when it comes to the employee culture. So that's about me. Now I'm looking forward to the discussion here because I'm gonna have a lot of takeaways from here. Thank you, everyone.
And should we refer to you as Lieutenant Commander Buller then? I can't call you Tejinder now that I know your rank.
Now I'm more of a corporate person, so I prefer Tejinder. Now Lieutenant Commander sounds too long, So.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for that. Yes, please, whoever wants to go next, and then we can start the discussion.
Okay, I think I'll start. This is Preeja Serene. I have in all a total of 12 plus years of experience into the similar, kind of domain, HR domain, and have been kind of with Machintel, work with Machintel Systems Private Limited, which is based out of Pune and also has its headquarters in US. And this is such a wonderful opportunity to actually share what we have learned for these many years, and such a great platform. So to kind of share it with the co-leaders and the managers out there, the panelists, the attendees, and everybody. So all thanks to the Loop Health for organizing such a great event. And I really appreciate the fact that you all gather it, and was a second one, I guess, which one I have attended. The last one was amazing. It was awesomely organized, and the whole team has been really great. So it was no wonder that I would say no to this. And myself, I wanted to learn a lot of things, because I have so many questions myself and things to learn as well from my co-panelists who have 15 plus years of experience, 20 plus years of experience. So it's amazing, and I'm looking forward to this. So also I'll be contributing a lot in terms of, because I've myself spent 5+ years here with Machintel itself, and we daily see a lot of things, feedback being the core, and not just for the managers, for the HRs, it's kind of starts from the beginning itself, from the onboarding, from the recruitment itself. It starts the feedback thing, and it ends till the separation thing. So a lot of places where we also play a vital role in the employees, though they might not be from our teams. So a lot of things that we have also kind of come across and learned a lot during the process, and that's what probably I'll be adding in today's session. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Preeja. Pooja, would you like to go next? And then Gaurav.
All right, sorry, Gaurav. So I take ahead. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Pooja Bansal, and I've been a hardcore HR professional with over 20 years of experience. Currently, I'm leading in the position of Chief Human Resource Officer for a multinational automobile organization called Piaggio Vehicles. It's a 100% subsidiary of Italian Piaggio, so a multinational company based out of Pune, the corporate office with manufacturing plants in Baramati. Like I mentioned, hardcore 20 years of HR experience, and I think the subject of discussion that we're going to talk today is about feedback, appraisals, performance management, and I believe it's one of the most sensitive and one of the most crucial subjects of discussion, no matter which phase of career you are. Even though we've reached at the level of executives in the organization, I guess this kind of subject is so relevant to us as well. So hopefully we'll be able to contribute with my co-panelists today, and out of experience, as well as something that will add value to all the participants watching us. Thank you.
Thank you, Pooja. Gaurav?
Great. Happy to go last, Srini. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gaurav Shukla. In my current role, I head the human resources for Ferring Pharmaceuticals. We are a Swiss-based global organization. And we are an organization whose stated purpose is building families and helping people live better lives. We are world's largest reproductive medicine maternal health organization. So we help couple build babies in that literal sense, and we are proud of it, of helping couples across world. Doesn't matter which gender, where you belong from, as long as you want to build families, we are there. Personally, years of experience, 16. Does it matter? I don't know, but happy to contribute today. My greatest learning has been working with Ferring for about more than 10 years now, and my previous organization, Glenmark Pharmaceuticals. So over to you, Srini. Let's get started.
Thank you. Wonderful. Great. Very excited to be speaking with all of you. So let me start off by asking you this question. So feedback is one of those words that everyone kind of believes that they understand, but we may all understand it in a very different way. So can I call upon each of you to maybe define what feedback really means in your words based on your experience? So if you want this time around, maybe Gaurav will start with you, and then reverse the order a bit.
Okay. As I said, when I was putting up my LinkedIn post, feedback is a gift. Embrace it. So when you get a gift, what do? You thank, and you feel good about it, right? You don't go back to the person and say, why did this gift or why did not that gift? Similarly, I believe feedback is something that you should ask for it and you should provide, which helps you as a professional to grow, to understand the blind areas that you can't see, and also to understand where you've done good and where you can improve. So that's something that I would say.
All right. Pooja?
For me, I think feedback is something that builds a strong foundation for effective communication. So when we are actually talking about how do you want to define your culture of the organization, one of the key criteria that most of the organizations would want would be collaborative communication, effective communication. And so if you have good, strong foundation of feedback in the organization, it will definitely be, one of the consequences will be having very healthy communication cross-functionally as well as within functions. So something that encourages excellent communication is feedback.
Okay. Tejinder?
Yes, well, I agree with the definitions, but one thing I would like to how I go about feedback is I consider it to be the intent that matters. The intent feedback is basically you're sharing information, but more than sharing information, I feel the intent of sharing that information is what makes this feedback different. The intent of sharing information when you're giving feedback is mutual growth and development. You're looking for an input to be shared. You're looking for an information to be shared with the other person or the recipient with an intention of improving yourself and improving helping other person improve. So I think it is the intent with which this information is being shared is more important for me. So I go feedback to be an helping intent. You are trying to help other person. It is not just pointing out flaws or you commending someone for or appraising someone for their achievements, but more of it I feel it is more of sharing information with an intent of mutual growth both ways. That's how I take.
Got it. Preeja, your thoughts on feedback?
Yeah. I think feedback plays a major role, when, we see company values, they have excellence, effectiveness as their, core values, and we thrive for that. So I think feedback is something that plays a huge, huge role there, where, it helps person to be the better, version of themselves every single day. Because only then probably person knows that how the person is on the job, and how the person has to move forward. So this plays a very, very vital role when it comes to having or achieving that excellence in the organization, or having that effectiveness in the overall work front. So I think it's the major part that it kind of plays, so role that plays. So that's what I feel. It is effective for kind of getting that excellence that we strive for, and getting that whole perfection, or probably getting close to that objective. So what if somebody, my manager won't give any feedback to me, probably it will be stuck with that person itself and won't move to me, and unless it moves to me I won't be able to give that same. So that is the whole culture has to be built there, so that we get to the objective of the organization too. So yeah, that's what I feel. It's helpful for the achieving that excellence and effectiveness.
Great. I think excellent insight. So we spoke about feedback in terms of something that should be welcomed, or at least accepted with gratitude as a gift. The intent is important, so it's constructive in that sense, helping someone get better. There should be a culture of feedback created. But in reality, do you believe that employees really understand the difference between feedback and review? Because these are two things that they coexist. Maybe one is part of another, and I'll open it up to any of you who wants to take that. Is it clear in employees' minds, or even in the minds of managers, for example? It's like, as heads of HR and leaders, I think sometimes it might be a curse of clarity that we have, but sometimes we assume that the same thing is clear to the rank and file. Do you believe that this concept of feedback and versus a review is clearly understood in the organization, managers and employees?
Well, I would like to point out here, I think the understanding is different at different levels of the organization. Every level, the organization, you have, if I talk about executive level, you will find that feedback, they consider it to be something negative. The moment you talk about it, because generally they are in that stage of their career wherein they need that continuous input to improve. Right. So generally, even if the intent is good, even if the manager is sharing it with an intent of helping them, so the mental makeup is such, which is purely based on the experience and the level at which they are in the organization. So I think what you said is very correct. The understanding of this word is very different at different levels of organization. It is not the same. That's how I feel, and I have observed this. This is my observation in last 19, 17 years of my being in this system.
Would the other panelists agree with this, that somewhere that consistent understanding of this is missing across different levels? Or if you have any other insights on how people of different experience levels look at it, like is there a group that looks at it the way you just defined it? Is there a group that is like, you're attacking me by giving me any feedback? They get super defensive.
Well, according to me in our company, I'll go out of my experience, is that we do value feedback and the mechanisms. I think it has a lot to do with the organization. If you have a platform, you have a tool, you have a framework, and you do not differentiate amongst the various grades and levels, I guess you can have a very, very stable culture environment of feedback. So it has a lot to do with what is the value that the organization pays to the feedback framework, mechanism, tool, or even the system that is followed. So a lot of organizations would not really have a very formal performance management process. How many times do you see executives actually getting graded and evaluated by the CEO or the CMD, etc., and you just have something which is more verbal and it could be skipped as well. But there are organizations like mine where each one of us, I mean, everything in the performance management system begins from the top. That means until and unless we as executives are not evaluated by our manager, which is the CMD of the organization, and plus the functional evaluation which comes from the group, we don't initiate the performance management system below. So while I guess, and I've also seen the other side. So I've also seen what Tejinder was talking about actually, and she's right. But I guess what is followed in the organization is what really is demonstrated at the top. So if at the top and the culture and the organization at the whole does believe into a feedback mechanism which starts from the top and then percolates below, I guess that's a culture that flows in. And it can happen the other way around as well.
So it's more like if a leader says that, I'm open to learning, tell me something that I'm doing right or wrong, then the same thing, all the employees will say, okay, which means that we also need to be open to sort of learning. So I think
maybe I will.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, maybe I will just jump in and try and summarize or put my thoughts of my colleagues, panelists, co-panelists have been sharing. For sure, I agree to what Pooja was saying. And with my experience, as organization and as organization, the culture that you build in, you really need to decide what are you using feedback for, and therefore the intent, and therefore the tool, therefore the processes. You use it for a performance management. You use it for development. You use it for giving in an engagement. You use it while talent acquisition process. You can use it, and loop in anywhere. But unless you're very sure what are you using feedback for, there is a huge confusion about performance reviews and feedbacks. And therefore, most of the times you see managers, the line managers, first line, second line, they use performance reviews, as a way to provide feedback. And most times you see that those are not very constructive.
Right.
So yes, they will be.
Yes, sorry. Please go ahead.
No, go ahead, Tejinder.
No,
Go ahead.
no, this is one very valid point, rather very interesting point, which Pooja has brought out, and I totally agree with it, that the approach with which you are bringing this feedback culture or the performance management system into the organization, that plays a vital role in how effective and how, beautifully it is used, because it all depends on how it is being. If it is a process-driven feedback, if it is a process-driven review, if it is a transparent and a clear performance management system, I think the feedbacks will not be taken as a negative thing. It will always be taken in the light that, it is for my own improvement. It is for the betterment of the whole organization. So what she said is, I think, exactly the point, that it has to be driven in such a way in the organization. The culture has to be built around the performance management system in such a way that it is taken in the right spirit. And then it really doesn't matter who is giving you and at what level you are giving the feedback, because then the whole essence, the whole point of having this feedback is having the clarity, transparency, and belief in the system, that our performance system is there to help people grow. I think that's very beautifully put by Pooja. My biggest takeaway would be this, from this. So definitely.
So
Srini, one of my tricks that I've used now over some years is, unless in my HR organization, I get a request, can you give me a feedback? I say yes if you're ready to give me one feedback.
Got it.
So that puts the intent and but really sets the culture as to but you can ask for a feedback, but you should be ready to give a feedback.
And one more thing, I think there cannot be one typical kind of feedback system or the performance management system which can be adopted by all. It has to be very specific to the industry, the nature of employees you have, the kind of background they come from, the kind of work profile environment they are working in. Because my thing would be, if a person is working in a boiler room, say from morning to evening, and suddenly you call him for a feedback and you give him a negative feedback, obviously the environment is such that he's going to be triggered, every time they call me the feedback is negative, or they'll always take it. So I think a lot of other factors also play a major role in deciding what is the right kind of performance management or feedback system for every organization, and for that matter every industry. It cannot be put in any kind of I would say standardized way of implementing it. It is very dynamic. It has to be, based on the environment you're working or you're operating.
So some of you touched upon this word culture, and I think that sort of segues into the question I had lined up anyway. Is we're all working in we're all Indians. We're working in an Indian context. Some of us are working for multinational companies where there are global policies that are implemented in India. Some of us are working for sort of homegrown companies. So how much does the Indian culture have to do with the way employees and managers perceive feedback, either receiving it or giving it? Is there a cultural, not a baggage, but it's like, is the corporate culture derived from our societal makeup, where we are not very direct as people? We sometimes think it's very rude to actually speak our mind. Maybe in certain other cultures, they pride themselves in being very upfront and clear. I mean, it's not personal, they'll just have to say whatever they have to say. But in India, I find that we are not always very clear on that. So what are your thoughts on culture as a as an enabler or impediment to creating a nice feedback culture within a company, the societal culture?
Maybe I'll chip in here and then ask my other co-panelists to join in. For sure, Srini, what you said is makes a lot of sense. Any multinational organization operating in our country, the culture, the Indian context society plays a big role. Having said that, if you've set the culture expectations and it is led from the top, it does take time, but the feedback culture starts, building in. And therefore, what I said, you decide, you set the expectations of what is the feedback going to used for, makes a lot of sense. And if it's driven from top, then it starts kicking in, even though you're operating in a society which is not very direct, as you say.
Right.
All right.
Any
So
And
other
also,
thoughts?
Srini, sorry, yeah, that probably whatever I think the culture is, training or say the manager on how to provide the feedback, understanding the personalities, the communication patterns of people, that is very important for us to know that that also plays a good role there, because whatever probably the culture is from the top or to bottom, if the manager or say anybody as leaders, as we are not effective in giving the feedback, probably the right message would not really pass to the team members too. So I guess that training the right probably the whole system understanding and behavioral patterns, because feedback not always it is positive. You have some retaliations coming from the other end. So I think training the manager to handle all those situations probably will only make it effective. I guess otherwise, it becomes a little traumatic for both the people, because even if you say, that we are from India itself, in India itself, there are different culture. We have different kind of setup at home. A different household has, we react to certain things in a different way. So probably I might be a little loud, I might be a little submissive, the other person is not. So understanding that whole pattern of behavior, and having that emotional maturity to take in that whole feedback and settle the whole situation there would also play a good role. And when it comes to MNCs or working globally employees as well, yes, they do take direct feedbacks, but definitely with some kind of empathy also has to be kind of attached, where the manager would know it better, and the person has to train themselves, or we as leaders should be trained enough to kind of deal with that kind of different temperament as well. So I think training is a lot important, and we have to kind of keep ourselves upgraded, and that will come, I think, with regular communication with our team members. In fact, so we understand their whole behavioral pattern during the course, and during the review time it is not a surprise for them how we react, and neither for us it is a surprise how they react during giving any negative feedback. So that's from my side.
So here's one area where I struggle with constantly, and maybe we can collectively brainstorm on this, is the feedback and the review. Right, the review, all companies have a performance management system, a review system. It's either OKRs or whatever, management by objectives and things like that. Where does feedback fit into that? Where does the feedback stop and the review start? Does one lead to another? Is one part of another? Let's get some ideas from you guys on how
I'll
you.
start on this, Srini, for you. The problem is that as feedback givers and feedback receivers, we kind of use feedback and reviews which are interlinked. Basically, they need not be. What you really looked at feedback is what Gaurav in the beginning said. Feedback is a gift. Gift need not be linked only to a process that is running formally once in a year or twice in a year. So feedback, according to me, is something which has to be free flow. Generally does not need to be formal. You don't need to have a written statements of feedback or documentation of the feedback. Why not have it in an informal environment? Why not have it verbal? Make it more situation based. Like, you say it like, on the spot recognition, on the spot feedback. So it has to be something which is not linked always to a formal process and mechanism. So employees or managers need not have to be linked to a formal mechanism. That's when the organization runs once in a year or twice in a year performance management system. I have the opportunity of giving feedback. So one change that we need to bring about in the managers as well as the employees is feedback is something which is not situation based. Just have to be free flowing. Okay. You don't need to wait for somebody to drive a feedback process.
So which means it can be done at any time, whereas a review is something that you would do.
Exactly. Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, just one last thing. In fact, for me, I feel when you link feedback to reviews, what are reviews meant for? At the end of the day, reviews are going to be percolating in terms of compensation reviews, pay, promotions, or some substantial output that the employee expects out of the performance appraisal system. Something which would be monetary, non-monetary, could be anything. Whereas feedback not necessarily would give you something which is more substantial, which is monetary or non-monetary. Right? It's going to be something which will build your future. That means towards the end of the year, when I actually sit to do your appraisals, there's a lot of feedback which is already available with you. So surprises are less. And then it is more evidence-based as well. Right? So feedback should, in my opinion, if you want feedback culture, it should be de-linked with the performance appraisal system.
Yeah, sure. I would like to add on here one very good word which Pooja used is a gift. I consider feedback as a gift. Why? I'll tell you. If I talk in a operational language, feedback is more like a tactical approach for me for immediate course correction for an employee or for a process. Whereas review is more like a strategic move. If I have to look for, review it's over a period of time, and it cannot be independent. Whereas feedback is more of a tactical move, and it gives me an option of immediate course correction in whatever area or whatever incident I'm in. Whereas review has to be a very calculated move. You have to strategically think what are the long-term outcomes of that. So if you ask me, I also take it as a gift. I totally agree with Pooja on this because it gives me a way to have course correction then and there. I don't have to wait for 2 months, to give that feedback, or maybe wait for a review to happen and then tell an employee that he needs to or where he needs to focus. This is currently right now. I am giving a feedback to you. What will help you become better at personal level, professional level, everywhere. So, like if I have to define it, I take feedback is more like a tactical approach to a situation rather than a strategic approach to a situation.
Should that be called out? Like, let me ask Gaurav and Preeja this question that just okay, let's assume that employees don't have this clarity of thought, and even managers may not. So, Preeja, you spoke about training managers, right? So, should we train managers to say when you're doing a feedback session, you need to say certain things up front, which will make the other person, put their guard down and just be more open to, because usually in reviews it's a little bit more formal, you have objectives, you have scores and stuff like that, but this feels a little different. So should we train our managers, our line managers, in that way to say set the stage slightly differently when in a feedback session versus a review?
Pitching
Yes, it
in
must.
here. Go ahead, Preeja.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Training, not to the extent where we in fact tell them the case studies and all. We can't get into that extent. But yes, definitely, how to deal with any negative reactions that you get. How to deal with that. What words you can use. They're very simple kind words. Probably maybe starting off with some positive things and then pulling them in with the getting their buy-in is very important. And that will happen, as I said, uh, only with your regular communication with them in their daily lives, in their daily routine, where you also understand their challenges. So it's not a one way thing where you are just sitting and giving the feedback, or probably going around and giving the feedback. But if you don't understand their work, their daily thing, probably you will not be able to add any input or give any suggestions, because the other one would not connect it with you, because the person will always have a feeling that the manager doesn't know my work and how much of the effort goes in building one document or anything of that sort. So I think training them to handle such situations, but a lot of homework the managers also have to do in terms of getting into their work of the team members, understanding how it gets done, and giving better ideas. And that ongoing communication builds trust as well, that my manager knows it. And what happens with these exercises or homework is that both of them know that where the person is lacking and where the positive points are. So I myself experienced this, that we both know that where the strengths are and where the weaknesses are. So that whole odd situation, or probably a little awkward silence, those things never come up. So it's a very kind of agreed kind of a thing. So we're just sitting and discussing something. So but we know, okay, yeah, I do lack in this because you saw me last week doing this in a different way. So that kind of daily conversation has to be there. Yes, we have to, but continuously train the managers, also take the feedback from the team members how the manager is. And as I said, using some words can definitely help. The way you ask the question also helps. Taking their buy-in also helps. Asking them, as Gaurav said initially, I ask for a feedback for me, so that also kind of helps. And I think Tejinder said the intent of the feedback is also very important. The objective also is very important, because there shouldn't be any biasness there, visible, clearly visible on the managers. And it's, if you see, the intentions are very quickly caught by people. So they can quickly understand whether the manager wants the good of me or bad of me. So that has to be very clear, very transparent with the people. And if that regular thing is happening, probably then I think we can have this smooth conversation happening, and we will not even know as HRs that did something of that even happen. But yes, work is going good because the feedback process, entire thing was very smooth. So I think getting all the managers together, training them and understanding what the challenge was and how to tackle that better, probably we can put that into a training plan, and how they can be better with the conversations, understanding the communication patterns of each will also help a lot, in making them understand, how the behavioral thing is. They might not know. It is always with ignorance that it happens, whatever the negatively the whole process happens. It's always because of the ignorance and not really with any intention of wrongdoing. So that's what, if intentions of the managers are clear and very transparent, I think it shouldn't be a big problem during the process.
Okay. Great point. Gaurav, any thoughts from you
Yeah,
on separate these?
so absolutely agree with my co-panelist. But what are feedbacks? And to make it life much easier, one of my experiences that I want to share is feedbacks are nothing more than conversations, right? And conversations are part of organizations left, right, center. Every day, every moment you're having conversations. So what we started doing is make feedback as a way of life for conversations. And therefore, it becomes free flowing. Therefore, you are calling it out at any point of time. And therefore, you are slightly getting away from the surprises and not getting into reviews. So if you are able to make a feedback part of daily conversations, you really don't need to have a very hefty trainings for managers. You just need to give them small tools which they can, practice day in, day out, and they are better in terms of using feedbacks.
Got it. Now, in terms of, no, these are great points. And so in terms of sort of formally incorporating feedbacks as part of a review calendar, what would be the ideal recommendation? That, I mean, what should be the ideal guideline that you can schedule, like, let's say for every review that you do, let's say once in a quarter, have at least one or two feedback sessions in the lead up to that, just so that you are able to influence your team in the right direction.
So
Don't
maybe I will come in
just go
here.
review without having had the opportunity to give them a chance to course correct. Is that what you would recommend?
So I will come in here as I would go back to the first thing that somebody said is, what is your current culture? Where are you in terms of setting up a feedback culture? If you're just starting as an organization to put up a feedback culture, maybe you need to have very clear how many sessions of feedback leading into your performance review process, blah, blah, blah. But then if you are a matured organization and feedback is part of your culture, you don't need to really guide people. And you leave, for example, we at Ferring, the feedback is open at any point of time, right after your goals are set or no goals set, any point of time. You are looking at doing a talent management or any process. The feedback is open. Employee and manager at any point of time do a feedback. If they want to go on a HRMS, which is Workday, and put it there, possible. Do what a very verbal feedback possible. So that happens once your organization matures. But I would say an ideal process would be at least 3 or 4 sessions of feedback before you move in to a performance review sessions.
Right.
Can I add
Yes,
a
yes.
experience here? So what do we do at Piaggio? Actually, we believe that both too much of feedback and too less of feedback, both is not in the interest of the organization as well as the manager and the employee. You need to have a balanced approach. So what do we do at Piaggio? We do not really make a minimum feedback session number, etc., because we believe that every individual is unique. You have the top performers, you may have average performers, and you may also have people who are struggling to do the job, which could be due to various reasons. So we every year train people managers on the same framework of situational leadership. And most of my panelists would know situational leadership categorically talks about the various leadership styles, which has to vary depending upon at what stage is your team member. So, if there is an employee who is highly committed and highly competent, what kind of a style are you going to use? Now, if you're going to use for that employee something which is directive, maybe it is something which is totally going against the individual. So I say, and I use the same formula for feedback. So too much of feedback for somebody who's already a high performance, very committed, very competent. Do you think it's going to be helping that individual? And do you think you really need to invest that much of time? Whereas somebody who's
Right.
really struggling or needs really feedback so that the person can move ahead in the profession, investing into that individual with more frequency and higher level of feedback sessions could be useful. So my experiences vary the number of sessions depending upon to whom are you giving the feedback and at what stage of career is that individual who is receiving the feedback.
So a couple of
Here,
questions
yeah.
based on what you said. One is tools. I think Gaurav mentioned tools. So do you all believe that this is something like sometimes, tools are garbage in, garbage out. So do you believe that we can run an effective feedback system or a culture without tools, or are there certain tools that you recommend? Should every performance management system have a tool in place for feedback?
Before we go to that, I just wanted to add here, Srini, like we discussed about this, frequency of feedbacks, right?
Yeah.
What should be frequency? So I think I'll go back to the very beginning of a session. Your frequency is defined by your culture and the intent, your culture, your intent comes from your culture. What is the intent of your feedback? If you want it to be purely on the basis of employee improvement, so you will see that this employee is actually struggling to improve, and that's the time when you need to reach out to this person in a constructive way to help them how they can improve. Maybe they don't know how to do it, so that I think is the right time, and that would be the right kind of frequency that you need to set, driven by the culture of an organization, that when the feedback is to be given, because the intent is very clear that this employee is struggling, he doesn't know the way out, he is trying. You have built a culture wherein your employee wants to improve, right? So your culture is deriving your feedback, but your intent is to help the employee, give them a way out so that they can achieve the desired standards and outputs effectively. Now coming to the second part of it, tools does I don't completely deny that we don't need. I go by the fact that they make your work more efficient. So tools are generally called tools because they make your work, but how effectively used, in the organization, that kind of decides whether you actually need that tool in the organization or not. So it's purely, situational, conditional, but then tools are beneficial, are effective, but only if they're being used, for the right reason and in a right way. That's how I go about it.
Understood. And any other thoughts on tooling, technology?
Just to add there, I believe tools, rightly said so, selection of the tools and the purpose for which you're going to use that tool is very important. I think a lot of times we've been, we take it as a fashion that you need this particular tool, the feedback tool, to be implemented.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's a trend. In the fraternity, every organization is using it, but selection of the tool, rightfulness of the tool, the intent and objective of the tool is very, very important. So for example, if you're going to use a 360-degree feedback mechanism, the most important foundation is the maturity of the organization. Are you mature enough to run this tool and to use the inputs that come out of that tool for effective feedback? Now, it could be very threatening and it could actually hamper the organization working in case the tool is not applied correctly for feedback. Similarly, using anonymous confidential tools for seeking feedback, for giving feedback, I guess all the kind of tools, they are provided to you because it helps you, it can create a framework and mechanism. But organizations need to be very, very matured to apply the tool that can be applicable in the culture in which they operate.
And size of the organization, most of the startups you will find, they are struggling with this. They try to implement, they go by what is prevalent in the market, they pick up some tool from there, and they just don't know because they don't have a performance management system in place which can drive these tools. These tools have to be driven by a system in place. You are just replacing your existing system with a tool. Problem is, most of the organization, they just put the tool there, but they don't have a system. and then they start struggling with it, and then eventually after 2 years they move on to another tool and they start cribbing about the tool. But like the way Pooja mentioned, it is the selection and the purpose for which you are using the tool. So you need to have a system in place and then replace it with a tool, rather than having a tool and then trying to build a system on it. So that's I think where the tooling or the tools which we are selecting makes a difference in an organization.
Also, if I may add, Srini, very important. I have seen organizations, they pick up a tool and they drop it after 2 or 3 years because they feel they've not really achieved what the intent or the purpose was. But my strong recommendation out of my 20 years experience is, no matter which framework and tool you want to apply, give it time to mature. You should not be changing. You should not be flipping, because everything takes time. Culture is not built overnight. You need to give at least 4 or 5 rounds or 4 or 5 years of consistently using that particular tool to really see how much it's contributed to the organization. So even if you've done a wrong pick, it doesn't matter. Continue with it and try to see how you can amend and how you can make that tool adapt to your organization objective, rather than dropping that tool and bringing another tool in the system.
To add what Pooja and Tejinder have said, for sure, for me, tool is important. You do your due diligence and you implement a tool. And if you want to build a culture of feedback, sustainability of tool is important, whichever tool you choose across the spectrum of tools, because it's not going to only be beneficial for you now, but 5 years down the line, if you want to change something, change a culture, you have data to bank on as to what do we want to move on then. Imagine every 2 years you're changing and you don't know what you're getting in.
Great. So one thing that came up as an idea when some of you were giving me your answers, feedback is essentially, in an ideal world, a two-way system. So it's not just what an employer gives to an employee. You should also be able to take it back from the employee back to the organization. Do you find that what has worked for you in terms of encouraging employees to give feedback? Because always this fear that employees have, yeah, if I'm too honest, then it might impact me in some way. And I personally have seen anonymized feedback mechanisms, peer review. Sometimes in a peer review scenario or a 360-degree scenario, there is an anonymization that is also used. So do you feel like anonymization, now I'm not talking about a one-on-one feedback, but I'm just talking about like a broad-based mechanism where, let's say, an employee wants to complain about the canteen food, or the person wants to say that my manager is actually a toxic person. Anything, whatever that they want to say. Is anonymization something that you would recommend to encourage more employees to give feedback back to the organization or to the
Again, circling back, what's your culture? Do you really promote an open, transparent feedback from the employees? And this is not one-to-one, as you said. Engagement surveys, any engagement survey, I'm not talking about any one, are one of the best ways to capture it. Depending upon what do you want to capture, it does give you a data about some services, culture, toxic, non-toxics, manager, accountability, and so on. I think that's one of the best ways to actually capture
Yeah,
anonymity.
also Srini, as you said, whether it has to be anonymous or not, it can definitely be anonymous, because if you're starting with that, some, people might open up, because people are direct these days. They do share what's happening with them within the department or across the organization, as you said, could be a cafeteria thing or pantry thing or anything. So I guess that whole trust will build after that first survey gets done. And if there is any implementation happening from the organization, the positive implementation, for example, if there is a feedback given for the pantry, the whole thing has to be improved, food thing has to be improved. If you see that positive thing happening around, and if they see that whole change happening, their managers suddenly start, giving them the whole, a different approach in the work, daily work, I guess that is when the whole trust is again built. And the second time probably, they will have more openness. I guess if it is 50% in the first go, 75% people will open up, and they know that change is going to happen. And not necessarily even they understand it's not 100% that everything gets resolved, but yes, a few things definitely they see change in, and that will definitely work. It all depends on how the company takes it. It's not just for the sake purpose, probably, just taking the feedback and not working towards it. But yes, they should collectively see that change happening. People start talking about it, with their peers, or people in other departments. And when that whole thing happens, I guess you will have more of people coming into you and sharing more of feedback for the organization, or say for their managers also, that they are not really comfortable working with them or for them, or anything. It's because they have that whole trust that something is going to change there, and will stick to the organization also for a longer time. So it also is that how we kind of react to the feedback that we have got.
So
Here,
before you, yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
yes, sorry, I just wanted to add the one point here. I am a strong believer of it should be anonymous. I generally say that it should be anonymous for a simple reason that I, being a cognitive behavior practitioner, I've seen that human mind has this tendency, which we call it in terms of, halo effect, cognitive bias. It happens. Whatever said and done, percentage may vary. It could be 1%, 2%, 20%, 30%. But anonymous feedbacks give a freedom to the person who's giving a feedback to give that feedback without any hesitation. So there will not be any bias in the mind of the person who's giving a feedback. So I am a big supporter of anonymous feedbacks based on how the human mind works. So that's my take on that.
So we have a couple of questions, and before we get to that, I want to ask you all one question. Give me an example of one piece of feedback that you received that really made a big difference in your career. So you can briefly give us one anecdote, and then we have a couple of questions lined up from the audience, so we'll take that as well.
All right, so I think I'll start with this. I categorically remember one very relevant feedback that I got is, as you grow in the ladder, as you move in the career, your interactions are changing, complexities are changing. So one feedback that I received from my manager was, sometimes it's not necessary that you always be prompt in responding to an email. Very basic as it may sound, but I think it was very relevant. A lot of times we love to respond to every email that's in your inbox and instantly. So the manager told me, if there is an email which you want to react to because it upsets you, maybe just leave it there, take a halt, forget about it, come back maybe after a few hours or even a day, and then respond to that email, because after you've taken a halt in your thinking process and your responding is going to be more likely that it's going to be relevant to the receiver as well. So I guess that feedback really helped me, and I still follow that even today.
Great. So it helped you with prioritization, time management, and things like that. Great.
So I now that she mentioned, like Pooja mentioned, so I remembered I was very young in my career. I'm talking about defense forces. The situations are very different. People, they come from various background, and you tend to get emotional about things. And I was very, very emotional at that point of time. I joined Navy at the age of 21, and suddenly you're given such heavy burden of managing people, and so. One piece of advice which my superior gave me was feedback, rather. He said there should not be any open display of, liking or disliking of any of your subordinate. So that stuck to me and that helped me in a long way. He said whether you like an employee or subordinate or you don't like, your behavior should be same with the person whom you like or you don't like. That's a personal choice. But you have to behave as per the position you are in, and you have to take decision based on that. Do not let your likes and dislikes be out in the open, because that will make you a good leader. And that, I think, that was one advice that stuck to me, one feedback that stuck to me and helped me in lot many cases, wherein I had to remind myself time and again that even though if I don't like this person, or even if I like this person, but this is not the right way to go about it. I have to do this because this is what the job demands, this is what the situation demands. So that really helped me in my decision making throughout my career.
That's a great point.
I would go next. So this is very interesting. While I was growing, as Pooja was saying, I'm somebody an extrovert personality. I would chip in, prove my point, put in my things, debate it out in any conversations, any meetings. I'll be the first to put up my hand and say, okay, I want to speak in. While this is the way I am as a personality, it doesn't mean I want to prove in, but it's the way I want to contribute. But I started getting feedback from my manager that maybe outside world sees you somebody who wants to prove point every point of time. And it came regular in 2 years. What I started doing in is necessarily anchoring down myself and choosing where I need to chip in and looking at not the quantity of my feedbacks or coming in contributions, but quality. And therefore I would down my speaking ability, and started building up my comprehension and hearing ability to ensure what I talk about it making more sense to the panel or to the meeting that I put in. So that's the feedback that helped me a lot.
That's a great insight to receive early on in your career. Really nice. And Preeja, would you like to?
Yeah. Okay. So this was given by one of my ex-bosses, and till today I practice that honestly, and that works for the HR professionals. Honestly, that was, we tend to do, many activities and fun activities and stuff. Anything that we organize or plan to get things. It could be anything, any benefits or anything. So one thing that he said was, Preeja, just start it only if you will be able to sustain that whole idea, right, for a longer time. So do not get it just for that, the fashion or say the fad. Just don't get it for that, but make sure you're able to sustain that whole idea and for a longer time, because people get attached to good things very quickly. And if you just pull it instantly, because whatever our activities or whatever things that we take care of involves financial things. Now, for example, any company might not be able to support that at certain period. It'll be very difficult for you to pull that back from the employees, because people have got attached to that thing. It could be any a minimal thing also, organizing a party or organizing anything. And if you pull that back, probably it will be a little discomfort for you to manage the whole thing in the organization. So start what you can sustain. So that is one thing, and I still practice it honestly. I started only when it's really going to be there forever, and not really forever, but yeah, for a longer period, unless and until we get anything better than that. Otherwise, if you're going to pull it back or say just for a one or two instance, probably I don't really practice it. And because if you don't show it to them, it's totally fine, but if you show it and then take it back, it's a really negative thing. So that's one thing I still practice.
That's a great point as well, Preeja. So we have about 4 or 5 questions. So what I'll do is I'll invite each of you maybe to take one each. And I think you can see it as well. So Shubham has a question. How does your workplace deal with toxic behavior or negative attitudes from employees or management? Who would like to take that?
All right, should I take it?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you. So you know what, Shubham, unfortunately, no matter which organization you work on this planet, believe me, you will still come across toxic behaviors, toxic environment. There's never an ideal workplace to work. I guess, but as individuals, as employees, when you get associated with organizations, we have a larger role as well to play. So one of the things that you might want to do to work around this toxic manager, toxic environment is definitely to have more open communication. It's also the responsibility of the employee. It's not just the manager who has a role to play in creating a culture or creating a culture of feedback and open communication. As employees, we do have responsibility of taking another step of building trust with the managers. So it works, as you know, the pillar of trust works both ways. It's just not one way street. So try to build trust. Try to have more communications. Try to be the one who's seeking the feedback rather than waiting for somebody to come and give you the feedback. And at the same time, if you hone your skills, you might also be in a position to give feedback. By the way, as much as we talk about skills for giving good feedback, there are skills for receiving feedback as well. So I believe as employees, if we are able to hone our skills for receiving feedback, as well as honing our skills of how do we share our point of view and share our communication, our perspective with the managers, I believe the foundation of trust can start being created. And again, the journey is not going to be short lived. Nothing gets built overnight, right? So take the first step. In case you're waiting for the managers to take the step, do not do so. So play your part and start the journey of trust. And believe me, things of toxicity that you talk about, whether it's manager, organization, finally, as employees, we don't have the choice, one, to choose the manager, and second, we chose to join the organization as well. So we have a large role to play as employees in building culture, which could be at least lower on toxicity and have better environment.
Great. That's a great response. I hope that was useful for you, Shubham. Ishwari has a question. How do you define maturity or of the organization for running or building a feedback system?
I think I would like to answer this question. Like the way we said, it is a very dynamic process. You just can't define a time or in an growth cycle of an organization when to put a feedback system. It starts with the very outset when you start a business or when you are in an organization. The feedback is an integral part of it. How you develop upon it, I think it is more to do with the culture, like the way Gaurav mentioned initially. Your culture defines what is the right way or what kind of feedback will work. And slowly, once you put these performance management system and other associated, management systems into place, that defines the overall maturity along with the culture and the maturity level of your employees, how they take the feedback. So there is no set parameter or criteria by which you can define the maturity of an organization, when it comes to the feedback system. But then it is an integral part of it, and it is an ever evolving process. It is not that you are fully set, you have a fully set feedback system. That can never happen. You will always have some scope of improvement. There will be always some kind of inclusions, deletions, which will keep happening when we talk about the feedback system. That's how I take it.
That's a great point. Monish has a question. Is it advisable to include feedback in KPIs?
I can take this.
Yep.
Not sure about whether to include feedbacks on KPIs or not. If you are, just look at what KPIs is this referring to. But in KPIs are generally key performance indicators which are very specific. But if you are planning to take a feedback on those KPIs as to how it has been delivered and what has been delivered, that can be done through feedback. So that's the way you can look at including feedback in KPIs.
It's a great point. I think that marries both those worlds very nicely. Rajesh and Poonam have, I think, similar questions. What software platforms do you use for taking feedback or for pulse surveys? And which is the best tool for performance review in the manufacturing industry in India? So I suppose they're looking for some tool names or recommendations.
Maybe I can go in first, and I'll ask the other panelists to come in. What software platform do you use for taking feedback or pulse surveys? Entirely depends. And as organization, we don't define that, hey, we want to inculcate feedbacks, so therefore go to this system tomorrow. No, you do your due diligence and define we want a feedback because we want to build a culture which defines itself like blah blah blah, and therefore go to a tool and then say, is this the tool which is the worst of the tool or the best of the tool in the market, which is able to cater to my need of the organization? It's the need of the organization which defines which tool will be better than going for a flashy software which may or may not work in my condition or in my organization situation.
Anything specific for manufacturing, guys? I think a couple of you have some.
Manufacturing, for me, for example, pharmaceuticals, again, how do you define roles? What exactly do you want to commit out from those roles? Depends, would define which tool is better. For example, we've been using Workday for last 6-7 years. It's working very well, but we have defined, we know what Workday can do, what cannot do. I've used People Strong, and therefore that time we define what do we want to get out of the simple on the bench roles in R&D or in manufacturing. So again, same answer. You have to define what do you want to, take out from the system and look at the system capabilities before you choose which system is best for manufacturing or any other organization functions.
Great.
Here I would say when I go for selecting any tool, I generally go for the customizability option. It should be able to give me an option of customizing based on my needs. So generally, most of the systems, if you tools have a very basic, the structure or the I would say the foundation remains the same because they have all evolved from the similar kind of system. But at the end of the day, what matters is you should be able to customize based on your organization needs. So the more customizable the tool is, I think it is better suited for an organization.
Great. So I think the sign of good conversation is when you sort of lose track of time. And I think I've noticed that we are 6 minutes past 4 and we are reaching the end of the scheduled time. So I want to take this opportunity to, first of all, thank my co-panelists, Gaurav, Preeja, Tejinder, and Pooja for joining us in the last hour or so and really enriching. I've learned personally so much about this sort of nebulous topic of feedback. And I think there is a way, from whatever I've gathered, to create a healthy enough culture and environment where the practice of feedback can be used to help our employees improve and ultimately help them to achieve the goals for themselves and for the organization. It's just a matter of creating that right culture and the right kind of dynamic within the organization. So I just wanted to thank all of you for joining us this afternoon and to all of you who've logged in and shared your questions. I think it's been a really insightful and fun interaction. So thank you so much. And we will be in touch with you with recordings of the video, and obviously would love to hear your thoughts on social, what you've thought of this session. Please do share it with your audience, and hopefully others will also be able to tune in and learn from this. Thank you for your time today.